Hello everyone. So I've been out and about the last few days. I have been wearing my mask when I go into shops. I've been keeping a distance from people, doing all the stuff I'm told to do, but mostly because I don't want to upset other people. I don't really feel that risk too much. But even I can but I can feel the general sort of worry, fear, panic, and it's easy to capitulate to that. You know, if you're in an environment with other people all doing the same thing, it's like if you're in a situation where um, I remember I was in a speaking competition a number of years ago, and I was very calm coming up to it. I didn't really think it was a big deal, and then just coming up to it, I realised that everyone else was really anxious about it. And all of a sudden, I started to feel anxious because I'm picking up on all this anxiety from everyone else. And before that, I was just no, I didn't even think it was that important. So there's a feeling of almost like picking up on the panic or the fear or worry of other people. Now, there's nothing wrong with fear or panic or worry. I mean, these are natural human emotions, but everything has to be in proportion with what with what the risks are and what the problems are. And I've been getting in quite a lot of different conversations, and some of them have been getting kind of heated, and I'm trying to step back from escalating those by, it's very easy to get sarcastic or insult each other or whatever, but it's not good, and we don't need to all fall out with each other again, as with Brexit or whatever. But my position on coronavirus, and I don't think it's a wild, outlandish position. I think that basically there was maybe not enough information to really know what was happening when it first came out. I think this has been as generous as possible to our leaders in the medical establishment and so on. They didn't have enough information. Now, the World Health Organization, there's some weird stuff going on there between them and China. And like the fact that they don't recognize Taiwan as a country is very strange, despite the fact that Taiwan I believe it's an independent country from China, or maybe there's some kind of weird arrangement there, but they won't recognize it as an independent country just because it kind of insults China. So there's some weird stuff going on with World Health Organization, and it looks like maybe it looks like they sort of went along with helping China cover it up a little bit. It seems like China was having issues with the coronavirus going back to November, maybe before that, which also brings about the question, well, if it was spreading then, people were still traveling all around the world from China at that point. So was it spreading before then? There has actually been some information to suggest coronavirus was even in Europe, maybe even in 2019, or certainly closer to the start of the year. Now, I'm not saying that that's true, but I'm saying there has been some people have found some information suggesting that. So whatever happened there, and then it seemed like this thing was spreading, and it seemed like in Italy things got overwhelmed. Whatever happened in Italy, and then the UK government, which was initially looking to kind of just kind of a Sweden sort of thing, just tell people to here's some guidance, keep yourself safe sort of thing, changed to a lockdown strategy, which was a Chinese communist style strategy. um, but the strategy was based on a model from Imperial College of London, which had suggested there could be 500,000 deaths plus if we did nothing, 250,000 deaths regardless. Based on the information, the worst case scenario, 250,000 deaths regardless of any measures. Now, I think at that time I also think that the idea that this was so much worse than the flu was also ramped up by World Health Organization as well. But it seemed like maybe I'm wrong about this, but it seems like the case fatality rate was mixed up with the infection fatality rate. So the infection fatality rate of the flu is like 0.1%, which means if 1,000 people get the flu, one person dies. Um, If 1,000 people are infected with the flu, one person dies. That's the infection fatality rate of the flu. The case fatality rate would mean how many actual positive tests or cases or symptomatic cases, I think, essentially. And that's for coronavirus was initially 3.4%. I think it might be similar to that now. But it seems like they confused. They said, well, there's even a statement from the World Health Organization where they say uh, case fatality rate is about 3.4%, whereas there's a 0.1% fatality from flu infections. So infections are different from case fatality rate. Anyway, we need to get into that. There was a lot of confusing things going on. The media was building all this up. They were showing stuff happening in China with I remember pictures from China of hospitals and whatever was happening and a lot of panic. And then stories from Italy and all that. And so lockdown happened, but the hysteria had already been built up. And by that point, it was going to be hard for rational decision making, for science, for data, for any of that stuff to be put across unless you had a really rock solid, unless you had a leadership in place that was completely trusted by the people. Of course, the problem with that in any modern democracy is our media is is constantly building everything up to be worse than it is, and building everything up to be fearful and alarming and emotional and all that stuff too, because that's what gets views and they don't and obviously they attack the politicians, and I guess trust in politicians and so on and our leaders is a lot less than it used to be. So really, the government was probably faced with no other thing to do based on the information at the time than basically capitulate to public fear and lock down the country, regardless of the impact that would have. And that could have been absolutely the right thing to do if the coronavirus really had been as threatening as 250,000 deaths or 500,000 deaths. And it was all about flattening the curve and all that. And I remember watching as the cases went up, as the deaths went up. I remember watching that and thinking, where's this going to end? It just seemed to be rising, rising. I was just thinking, oh, this is terrible. Then all of a sudden, it hits a peak and starts to come down. And I look across Europe, starting to come down. I think, oh, well, it's not as bad as we thought it was. And that's where I started to change. I suppose I started to change my mind on it a bit. But also was finding a lot of information out there was a little bit. You were starting to see stuff that was just didn't make sense, and then you realised there was alternative opinions on it, and there was even very serious, qualified, scientists, not just random people, but people that worked for Oxford University and these kind of places, and Stanford University, and they were offering alternative opinions to the situation. So you're already starting to go, well, maybe there's more to this. And then as it's coming down, you think, well, that's it. The curve's been flattened. It wasn't as bad as we thought. So I'm guessing we're going to be opening up fairly soon. And that's back in March, right? And it didn't happen. And for me, why did it not happen? Because the public was still in a state of panic and fear. And they bought into that so much. And most people aren't really doing their own investigation into it. And the media was still getting so much out of continuing to build the hysteria that momentum just kept going and kept going. And it's kept going another 2-3 months. And it really shouldn't. And I was in Thailand, and it was bizarre. It was absolutely bizarre to be on an island with no cases, and they were closing the beaches. And they had a curfew, and you couldn't buy alcohol. Not that I buy alcohol, but they and it was like, okay, well, this doesn't make sense. Why no alcohol? Who's this for? this is like directly, it was just like a weird thing to affect the tourists or something. But people not allowed to go on the beach, people that don't have any symptoms and are feeling okay. Um, it was just strange, and it's been strange. And Thailand as a country had very few cases, and some people are saying, well, some people said to me, well, that's because Thailand they wear masks, they I don't know, they're a more obedient population. I don't really know why there was so few less cases in Thailand, although I've heard a lot of different stories. Where I was, um, there were still markets. I mean, there was still the food markets, the food shops were still open. People were encouraged to wear masks, so there was a lot of mask wearing. Maybe that was it, but I think they stopped travel around the country and they stopped people coming in. But that didn't stop the fact that Chinese people had been in and out of the country for months before that. So why didn't COVID circulate in a tropical country where most people are outside most of the time or a lot of the time and there's a lot of sunlight and there's not a lot of obesity and I mean there was 55 deaths in Thailand, like 55. Maybe do they have care homes in Thailand? Do they like this? Like that's where a lot of the deaths have happened. In Spain, I heard 75% of the deaths were in care homes. In the UK, about 50% of the deaths in care homes. In Italy, care homes, a lot of deaths. And it makes you start to think, well, the strategy, and I never heard this being said. I never even heard this being the priority or anything. I never heard it being said, what we need to do is completely isolate care homes and just get major amounts of medical attention in there and really protect those people, and I never saw that. Is it because we just didn't really care? Well, they're gonna die anyway. Maybe that's what it was. And to be honest, maybe that is what it was. Oh no, we don't want to put resources towards those people because they're gonna die anyway. We want to put it towards the hospital so that when 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds come in, that we can look after them. And I can understand that decision because that, saving a 20-year-old's life is a bigger deal than an 84-year-old with emphysema and things like that. So I can understand that decision, and I suppose if it's an either or decision, but it should have been all about isolating, quarantining, protecting the elderly and the very vulnerable. And it seems like the majority of deaths are men above of advanced years, like above the age of 75, with pre-existing conditions. But why did the schools close? Why did the universities close? Why did the colleges close? Why did gyms close? Why did places where healthy people go close? I can totally understand the pubs closing. This could have been a great opportunity. Let's close the pubs. Let's ban tobacco. Let's you know junk food. Junk food needs to stop. We didn't do any of that stuff. It could have been a good time to try and get a healthy message out there. It could have been a time to say, protect yourself, eat more fruits and vegetables. It could have been um, a really positive time for doing things like that. And, isolate, stay away from older people or whatever. But allow it to pass through the country because it's clearly not as fatal as was thought. Um, my particular opinion, my belief is that it has circulated through the country a lot more than expected. I'm not convinced we have the testing in place to really understand all that. I got a negative test for COVID. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe I did get it though. I don't know. Maybe I did have it at some point, but never even realised it, never had the symptoms. The fact that I was over in Koh Phangan and there was no cases maybe that means I never had it, but um, I don't. Obviously, I don't really know apart from I got a negative test about a week ago. So it's been a confusing sort of a situation. As I say, that's my position. I believe that more people have had this and it didn't have an effect. I think it's spread more. I think what we'll see is cases will continue to diminish, deaths will continue to diminish. I don't think the second wave is going to be significant. I think we're going to find that there's a lot of deaths that were caused by a lockdown, by people not going to hospital when they usually would have, or not going to their doctor when they usually would have, for fear of, or probably out of the fact that they didn't want to put that strain on the NHS, which they'd been told there was this major strain on the NHS, which didn't happen. It could have happened if we'd had 250,000 deaths or 500,000 deaths. It would have happened. But what we found out very quickly within a few weeks was that that wasn't going to happen within a very short space of time, because the peak was reached and then it started going down. It's not going to go back up again. It didn't. The lockdown didn't stop it. The idea of the lockdown was to flatten the curve, but not that you can actually stop it from happening or stop it from spreading. The upshot of all this might be that COVID is actually less deadly than the flu. It could be the case. It could be the case that the lockdown itself caused more deaths than anything else. It could be the case. I'm not saying it is the case. I'm just saying there is a possibility of that. If you look at, one of my friends was showing me this thing, at the date of lockdown, the deaths start to rise. Now, how did we get so lucky? You know, how did we time it so perfectly? The date of lockdown, the deaths just go up. How did that happen? It's kind of weird. So at that date, if you're sitting at home and you think you're having a heart attack, you might not phone for an ambulance. You might think, well, maybe this will pass. I don't know. Maybe that sounds crazy, but the thing is, heart attacks can be very subtle. A person can just feel like really bad. They don't know they're having a heart attack. Now, that's maybe a bit of a friend, people say a conspiracy theory idea. It could be, but that's a really serious question to ask, is how many deaths did lockdown cause itself? Because in the future, this whole scenario will be studied. In years to come, your grandchildren will ask you, what happened? Where were you during the coronavirus thing? The pandemic of 2020. This will be remembered for years as a cautionary tale. Most likely we will never do this again. Most likely the impact of this will be so devastating with the economy and everything. And just on there's a lot of people that at the time of lockdown, just before that, they'd made some big decisions in their life. There are probably, children, maybe not children that haven't been born, but like marriages that won't happen, and careers that won't start, and people that were just, applying for jobs and they were just about to break through to their next job, or people that were off, they're just about to be offered a job, then that got cancelled. And the impact of all these things is kind of incalculable. People that were children that were just starting to do well at school and starting getting into a rhythm, and then still school closes, and maybe their home life situation wasn't ideal. There's a lot of people whose lives got messed up, and ultimately we didn't even protect the people in the care homes, so there was nothing really gained from it. The people that were most vulnerable that died, they died, and it looks like we weren't able to stop it. In fact, it looks like we just sent infected people into care homes. That's how little, and if we're being honest, that's what the NHS and everything, that's the reality of it. they wanted resources for treating the mass amounts of younger people they expected to come in, and they sent infected people back to care homes. Stuff like that. As far as I'm aware, tell me if I'm wrong about that, but that's why we had the problem in care homes. People were sent from hospital to care homes that were infected. So it's been a crazy situation, right? And but I'm getting into these arguments with friends and stuff, and I don't really want to get into big arguments with people. And I don't know if I'm right about this, and maybe as we come out of lockdown, maybe everything starts to skyrocket again. I just don't think so. I think that it's spread more than we. I think this is spread all around Europe, and an interesting statistic is the deaths are now lower than the 5 year average right now. Deaths for this time of year are lower than the 5 year average, lower than the last 5 years. That could suggest that the people that died, they would have died this month or last month or next month. A lot of the people were very close to the end. And coronavirus might have just been that little straw on the, what do you call it? Straw on the camel's back. So, anyway, I'm happy to hear some of you guys' thoughts on all this and what you're doing. I've got no problem with wearing a mask. I don't think I'm going to die from not getting enough oxygen. I focus on my diet as being the biggest thing that impacts your health and your immunity. And if you're not focusing on your diet, I just don't know. None of this stuff matters. If you're not focusing on your diet, none of this social distancing and all that matters. And a lot of these vulnerable people with the comorbidities, if we'd got them in a care home and they were force fed fruit, they wouldn't have liked it. But if they were locked in there force fed fruit, we don't know how many could have actually recovered or not. Now people say you've got no studies or science around that. The thing is, if people are dying because of comorbidities and because of their level of health, and we put them on a diet that automatically means their body reverses that because the body has the ability to do so now, their chance of dying comes down. So that just logical. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video. And the fruit festival's coming up soon, so I might be offline for a while. But thanks for watching.